The NFL Top 100 list has begun every year. I forget how slowly it gets released. It is voted upon by the players, which makes it a little more interesting than a lot of other lists that are on the internet. It's going on right now. It caught my attention a couple days ago because Tua Tagovailoa ranked 90th. And that was a big fall for him because he was 36th the year before. And it got me wondering, where is Brock Purdy going to be? Right now, the list is at like 86, is 87, something like that, as we do this live on Wednesday morning. I put all of the NFL Top 100 lists in the computer and said, like, just based on history, where is a quarterback who's around in this range end up? And it gave a few predictions, and it said the most likely scenario was going to be that Purdy would be in the 42 to 48 range, which I don't agree with. I think he's going to be somewhere in the 50 to 64 range this year with, an ability to get back into the top 40, top 35 next year with a good year. This happens a lot. You'd be surprised, maybe you wouldn't, at how much quarterbacks vary. I think the best example of a guy who has gone up and down and up and down and up and down in these quarterback ranks, you ready for this comparison for Brock, is Dak Prescott, because Dak blew up as a rookie. It's really hard to maintain like a top 15. This is not quarterback rankings. This is overall NFL top 100 list. It's really hard to maintain, especially if you rock it early, which is what Dak did. Dak threw 23 touchdowns as a rookie and was ranked 14th. And then he completely fell off the next 2 years. He wasn't ranked. And then he got back up to like 46. And then he was 44. And then he was 56. And then last year, based on his 2023 performance, Dak came all the way back up to 16. So I guess what I'm saying is, if Purdy tumbles, it's not a low draft thing or a short thing or a arm thing, or this is what happens with guys. And Justin Herbert is a guy that tumbled a lot last year. I think it's interesting if you look at last year's top 100, and if you're watching on YouTube live, there is a poll where you can vote. I'd be interested with what you guys think on this, because he was 28 last year. He's not going to be 28 again this year. I don't see how it could be in the top. Anything what would stun me? Anything in the top 40 I'd be really impressed if the players were like, 40, 48. I'm like, you know what? That's still pretty good given the history. Okay, look, 48, for an example, is where Goff was last year. So what I did is I put together a list of last year's NFL top 100. And we've got the overall rank of just the quarterbacks. We've got the overall rank. We've got where that ranked them among QBs and what the change was from 2023 to 2024. Okay. So here, who's definitely going to be ahead of Brock on this list? Okay. And Purdy was 28 last year, which made him 7th among QBs. Okay. So guys, definitely ahead of him, right? This easy to do this. Like, no argument. You, me, somebody else on the internet, nobody would argue. All right. Who's definitely ahead of him? Lamar Jackson's definitely ahead of him. Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Stroud. I'm going to say Burrow. Goff will be ahead of him again. Not again. Goff will be ahead of him this year for sure. That's not even, we could argue about Herbert. I don't think we could argue about Cousins, Rodgers, Lawrence. I could see Stafford ahead of him. They both threw 20 touchdowns last year, but he could be ahead of him. Tua's not going to be ahead of him. He's 90. Dak, sure, I guess. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm doing ones you can't argue with. So guys you would not argue will be ahead. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that would put him 8th at best, but it's not going to be 8th. But let's just say. So that means at least 30 something, right? At least 30 something. But it's not going to be at best. I mean, the argument for not having him tumble completely, coming off an injury, durable. He was still top 10 in some, key categories. He was 8th in yards. He was 7th in QBR. His efficiency was still good. His 8.5 yards per attempt was 8th in the NFL. But key negative factors, the touchdown decline was significant. He threw like 36% fewer touchdowns. His completion percentage, which was, you see 69 in the range, 69 plus, which is 2 years ago was 69.4. That goes to 65.9, which is fine, good, fine. But that, that kind of 69-70 is where that's how Tua got ranked high, was all the touchdowns and the completion percentage. And then the team just struggled, right, in a big way. Now, other guys that could be ahead of him on this list or will be ahead of him on this list that were not on the list last year. I mean, one obvious guy is Baker, right? You got to think that Baker Mayfield, who I got a ton of respect for. I've said it many times. If you want to argue Baker's better than Brock Purdy, I got no beef with that. I would just forget about like 1 year, first 1 year. I would take Brock if he said next 5 years. But Baker's so cheap. Brock's not that expensive relative, but Baker threw a ton of touchdowns last year, led the league. Baker's got to be on this list, and he's got to be ahead of. I get it, right? There's a difference between what would you do for the next 5 years, or who do you think is the better player, and where the player is going to vote a guy in the NFL top 100. So I got to think Baker's going to be there. A guy that was not on the list last year that could be is Kyler. Darnold, not on the list, of course, last year. Wouldn't shock me. I mean, Darnold had a great year. Now, came out of nowhere and could fall again, but Darnold had a great year. A guy who's not on the list last year, but will be definitely ahead of him this year is Jaden Daniels. And then, could Love be above him? Maybe. But I think at minimum, we already said inarguably Evan 8 guys ahead of him based on last year's list. Now we're going to add Baker, I think inarguably, Jaden Daniels, inarguably. So now we're down to 10. All right. So the 10th best guy, now you're in the 40s. So it's just, which again, I don't even think you need to do any analysis to go, he's not going to be in the top 40 again. It couldn't be. And maybe, and I see a comment, well, I'll get to some of your comments. Let's see where the vote is. Maybe it wasn't as bad. I tend to think some of those, metrics say he wasn't as bad. Although if you watch the Brent Jones interview that I did and posted some clips on, and the full interview went up on Tuesday, I hope you'll check it out. He thought Brock was pressing last year, which of course. But this list is a little less nuanced, and it's not just a QB list. So it's every position. 10 guys have a good year, and if somebody has a less than great year, it pushes you down. So I just don't see how he's going to be in the top 40. 50 to 60, maybe that 55, somewhere in that range. 48 could be. Put it this way: if to kind of circle back to something I said earlier, if he's in the top 50, then I think it's a sign that players would go, yeah, the numbers weren't great and the winning wasn't great, but I still think he's a good player. I think anything after 50, you fall from 28 to 60. That's guys going, man, I don't think he's that guy that he was 2 years ago. Now, maybe that is an overly scientific. You hear players talk about what it's like to vote. It's like somebody just drops it off at some lockers. Guys do it, whatever, real quick. So it's not scientific. But I do think you have enough people doing it. It just gives you an idea of kind of what is the group think. If you watch Brock's interview on Bussin' with the Boys, part of their charm is if I do an interview, because I was not an all-pro NFL player, I better do my research. If I say to Brock, Brock, where are you from? It's God, what, if you're not prepared for this interview, what are you bringing to the table? And I've always loved this about when I call games on TV with it generally happens with older coaches. They don't feel any pressure to show that they're prepared. And the beauty is they've spent their whole careers preparing. So they can just watch and know exactly what's happening. So if I do a TV game with an older coach, generally, if he's my analyst, he'll go up to the other coach beforehand, be like, now who's your best player? Now, if I say that, the other coach is going to be like, dude, you're not prepared. A guy who's, a great coach can do that because there's other things he's going to see and bring to the table. And that's what I thought is, I think it's sweet and endearing. Like when you watch the Bussin' with the Boys interview, like that is how those guys are. That's players don't sit around looking at ESPN.com, Football Reference, PFF stats every Monday going, all right, I got Brock up 3 spots and they're too big. They got other stuff going on. That's for the rest of us to do. So, that's who's voting. That's the point I'm trying to make. That's who's voting. So, I do think when you get one, like if you take that person and put them against some PFF guy or you or me, like we're going to have the stats and like we'll be able to back up that argument. But when you get a collection of those guys, just watch ball. Like here's what I feel, and that matters. Like I don't think we should totally these guys who spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours watching it and playing it, watching it and playing it. They may not be able to make the same type of like A, B, C, D, E argument if they were at a podium in a debate, but they have good feel. So I'm just really interested to see. And by the way, their feel was he was 28th 2 years ago. So they're not afraid to rank him high. Plenty of people are happy to go, damn, that was good. Damn. Right? That's pretty good. I think I actually think if we gave fans NFL top 100 list, I think they would rank quarterbacks. Would they rank quarterbacks lower or higher than players do? I think it's counterintuitive, but for some reason in my gut, I feel that fans would rank quarterbacks lower than players do. Like if we did the NFL top 100 on Reddit, I bet the quarterbacks would generally rank. The elite guys would still be really high, but like I think they would generally rank lower. I haven't investigated why I feel that way, but I do feel that way. So like I think, and here's the other thing I wanted to mention before I get to some of your comments. 2026, like what's he going to do this year? Where will he be ranked? That's like what actually matters. Right now, we're just predicting a ranking that blah, blah, blah. What actually matters is where's he going to be in 2026? And what kind of performance will he have? Will his yards per attempt remain the same? Will his completion percentage go back up? And I think there's 3 main factors that will affect his 2026 ranking. All 3 of these factors, I think, it's likely to improve for him this year. And those 3 factors are touchdown production. I think he'll throw more touchdowns this year coming up than 20 that he did last year. I think, like a 26 touchdown year is would be a significant difference, would make a significant difference. And I will say, like, I think all 3 of these things I'm about to say are kind of tied to Christian McCaffrey. So red zone touchdowns, McCaffrey. Completion, because he does struggle in the red zone, relatively. Completion percentage, bring that back up to like 68, McCaffrey. And win. So I think those are the 3 biggest things. I think, as I mentioned at the top of this, when you look at Dak historically, Dak's all over the map. Now Dak has like a really high, like Dak, that offense, like Dak, you go out and throw, 36 touchdowns like he did a couple of years ago, and 37 touchdowns the year before that, and like 23 in the middle. So and he gets hurt, and so Dak is like swinging all over the place. I don't think we're going to see that big of a swing when we look back on like the next 4 years with Brock Purdy, and it may be that it's hard. It's really hard, I think, to get. Once they put you up high, like 28, and then you fall down, I think it's hard to get back up there. It'll take a couple of years. But, I think he'll be, like I said, I think he'll be like 48, 51 this year, and then a good year, and you're back at like 35. And that's fine. Because at the end of the day, we're just talking about lists here. what does it really matter? All right, let's see. Where did people vote? So far, live voting on the YouTube. I asked where is he going to be? The options were top 35 again, 36 to 50, 51 to 65, or 66 plus, which is on the table. But I think unlikely. So 42% of people voted 36 to 50. That's where the majority is. More people have voted that he'll be top 35 again. So this, I think you guys are wrong, very wrong. That he'll be top 35 again, then voted that he'll either be 51 to 65 or 66 plus, 14% and 14% on the 50 plus, so 28%. Top 35 again, 32%. I think you're crazy. But all right. Here's a comment on the stream from Mike. Says on Reddit, they probably would vote QBs lower because a lot of people would want an edgy, deep cut take. My opinion, I think, is simpler than that. I think that most people think quarterbacks suck. God, my theory is always every college football fan base, if you took whatever 130 of them, like 8 of them like their guy, and everyone else like this guy stinks. The NFL is a little more concentrated. It's the best of the best, but half of the fan bases, probably a little more than half. Like think about when the Niners had Jimmy Garoppolo. If you're a Niner fan, and he was a 14th, 15th type rank, and I think most people that watch him every day would say not good enough. So that over half of the teams in the NFL, over half of the fan bases think their quarterback's not good enough, and are right, by the way. So for that reason, I think fans would value it even less, even though again that it feels a little counterintuitive. Comment: I'm going over 4.5 rushing touchdowns for BCB this year. That's Brock. Good comment here from John, who says the biggest issue is QB 7 through 13 is a pick and mix bag. I think that is totally true. It's why I love the QB tier list versus like 1 through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think QB tiers that like Mike Sando does is a great way to do the list. Here's tier 1. There's 3 guys. Here's tier 2. There's 3 more guys. Here's tier 3. It's guys 8 through. So I agree with that. I think it's largely interchangeable, and that's where you get into like the nitpicky. Like I think Jordan Love's better. Well, I think Baker Mayfield's better. Well, I think Sam Darnold's better. It's like they could rotate spots every couple of years. Let's see if one of them eventually elevates and separates. I think I didn't mention Geno Smith. I wouldn't shock me if somebody on a list had Geno. I wouldn't shock me. I wouldn't, but somebody would. The year that I think is going to be really interesting. I do think Geno's kind of interesting this year, but is Darnold. Like I don't want to say been dismissive because I like Sam, and I was not all that surprised that he had a great year last year. I think we also saw kind of the limitations. I'd be better off back in Minnesota again. But I also think if you look at I think there's something to be said for a guy who just has an experience and overcomes and works through, kind of like Alex Smith, where you're in New York and it's a mess. And then you get to Carolina and it's a mess, but you're better. And then you get to a good situation with the Niners, but it's not really your situation, but you're better. Then you get to Minnesota, it's your best situation, and you're pretty good. You're excellent for the most part. You're really good. And now it's like, I don't know what exactly how it's going to come together in Seattle. It's not quite as good a Minnesota situation, but you're a better player now. And where do you settle in? I think that's a really interesting part of the 2025 football season for us to watch. And then Herbert's the other one that's really, another one that's really interesting to watch as he always is. Comment: I prefer GFF. Sure. It's a lot of work. Brock 7th in QB top 100, 7th in QB APY, 7th in QBR. Maybe you should change his number to 7 then. Brock was pressing, but he went from 1-2 to 6-8 last season. I don't first and second to 6th to 8th. I don't quite understand that comment. Karen said Sam hurt himself with those last 2 games. Bright lights were too big for him. He did hurt himself with those last 2 games. Tom says realistically, Purdy's a top 10 quarterback. The wording here is interesting. I do think he can realistically be a top 10 quarterback, and at any given time ranks from like 8 to 11. I think we did a ranking last year during the year, and early in the year or before the year, and it was 9. So, the thing the Jalen Hurts complicates it. What is he exactly? He was 15th last year. Has a championship. What is he exactly? Let's see on CJ Stroud another year. Burrow. So, here's your tier 1. Tier 1 is pretty clear, in my opinion, plus Burrow, which I think most people do that, but I don't know. So there you go. NFL Top 100. I think it's like 1 a day. I can't quite figure it out. I don't really remember it. So maybe it is 1 a day, or then it's 10. It feels like they release a few at a time and then a bunch. But anyway, we'll keep an eye. Baker. I'm going to say Baker is going to come out. I'm going to say Baker's like 34. 31. 31 is my Baker pick. All right. If you're watching on YouTube, appreciate that. Hit that like button, subscribe.